let's welcome back to the program from the Goldwater Institute, Victor Riches. Victor, hey, how you doing?
Hey, Jeff, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
You want to talk about tariffs? I know you probably have a lot to say about that, right? But we'll stay on topic here. Have you bought a 2x4 lately?
Not lately.
No. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right. So Victor, I had on, and you just had an op-ed that came out regarding the proposal that's being thrown around at the Arizona legislature, and I believe by Governor Ducey as well. This is one of Governor Ducey's good proposals regarding a huge tax cut. I had on Majority Leader Representative Ben Toma last week on this before the session kind of imploded, I guess you'd say, and they went on recess till June 10th. But you're a big advocate for this, I guess, flat tax and this issue of lowering taxes in Arizona. Why don't you give us the nuts and bolts of how you see it and what the proposal is?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the tax proposal, in a nutshell, the really crown jewel component of it is to actually take Arizona's tax brackets, collapse them into one bracket, and it'd be one very low flat tax. So it'd be a 2.5% flat tax. So that would be across the board. That would mean that everyone in the state would, in fact, get a tax break. And one of the things I like to stress to folks, the reason why this type of measure really is important for the state as we move forward, we really do need to make sure that we're able to attract job creators, high net worth individuals, so we can actually attract these types of folks to Arizona. And when you look right now at our overall tax burden in the state, we're kind of in the middle of the pack compared to most states. And when you look at our specific bordering states, places like Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, of course Nevada, we really don't have any tax advantage over those states. And I think you could argue with a state like Nevada that we have a disadvantage. And then when you think about Texas, of course, we're at a big disadvantage. And so I think Arizona's tax code as a whole has been pretty stagnant over the last number of years. And in the meantime, we've seen the state grow exponentially. As you guys know, I mean, we have about 1 million new people now than we did 10 years ago. It continues to grow. The growth projections are still through the growth over the next few years. And we're just at a point where we need to have a tax system that is actually competitive with the rest of the country. And the reality is income taxes are the best taxes to go in and do as much as we possibly can to eliminate them. Even during recessionary periods, we've seen that the income tax is pretty unreliable revenue source. Sales taxes are a much better revenue source. And so not only is it more fair for taxpayers across the board, but also, frankly, makes more sense just from a budgeting standpoint for the state.
Victor, I think you summed it up pretty good there. I called Arizona yesterday, Mark, in the mushy middle. I said, hey, we've got sales tax, we've got property tax, we've got income, we've got everything. So it's like, what's the advantage of coming into Arizona? Mark, you're in business. We're in the middle, and it's not always the best place to be. We're like Kmart.
Yeah, we even have a use tax here in the state.
It's
all kinds of taxes. The big concern I'm worried about is a lot of the other taxes are regressive taxes. They hit the lower income brackets harder. Property tax, sales tax, all these type of taxes. You have to pay them whether you have an income or not.
When you go out to the store to buy something other than, well, some places actually, Victor, we talked about this, have a food tax, a grocery tax, which I think is awful. I've talked to I think the mayor of Cottonwood and Prescott about that one before on the program. Yeah. But what do you say to that? Like playing the devil's advocate here, hey, we're going to go to something that affects people's, like, based more on sales tax versus the income tax side. Thoughts on that?
Well, one of the nice things about this proposal, and this is something that we really fought for over at Goldwater Institute, is that there was talk in the early stages when this proposal was being developed of actually increasing the sales tax to sort of offset some of the income tax cuts. And we made, I think, a very compelling case, and others did as well, that look, when you're in a situation like Arizona is in, where you're sitting on a $4 billion surplus, you just can't do that. It borders on being immoral to go down that type of road. And so One of the great things about this proposal is it doesn't increase the sales tax, and I would certainly agree. I think the state sales tax is on the high end when you compare it with other states. So I think that's another area of taxation that could be looked at a little further down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But the great thing about this tax is there are no tax increases associated with it. It's an actual legitimate pure tax cut, and it is a tax cut that impacts everyone, middle income, lower income, higher income. Everyone does get impacted by this in a beneficial way.
So what happened, Victor? And I've had on I had on Senator Kelly Townsend. Maybe it was yesterday, the day before. What happened with the legislature? This is really broken down, and to paint a picture here, the Republicans have a very slim majority: 16-14 in the Senate, 31-29 in the House. There's, as far as I can tell, no Democrat support for this thing, and several Republicans peeled off, and then the leadership said, hey, we're taking a break. The governor didn't like that. I've criticized the veto nuclear bomb that happened because there were some good bills in there, but it seems like there's some turmoil, and this isn't looking good. Your thoughts?
Well, the discussions that I've been having with legislative folks and folks from the governor's office, I don't think we're that far off. There are some members that don't like the flat tax component, but I think they're feeling more and more comfortable with it. I'll be honest with you. I think if the legislature had not, and what happened at the legislature, a number of people had vacation plans that they really should have never made. My own background is I spent 20 years working out of the Capitol, and we had a very strict rule.
Yeah.
You don't make vacation plans.
Well, you know how this goes. Typically the session ends by the end of May, but you don't know. It could go on for a long time. And I have heard from several of my friends in the legislature, as you're hearing, Victor, that the plane tickets were booked, maybe one even to Hawaii, and it was set, and hey, we can't come to agreement. I'm going to go on vacation. And I think that's where the governor got mad as well. I can't elaborate more than that, but that's the gist of it.
That's the general impression I've gotten. I mean, I'm not out there anymore. I'm not in those,
the trenches,
internal discussions.
Yeah.
But that's definitely the impression I've gotten. Sure. And I've talked to some rank and file members that were certainly upset with this idea that folks were going to keep vacation plans when they're not even in the middle of budget negotiations. They're at the back end of budget negotiations. So I do think that there's still a very, very good chance to get the flat tax passed. Like I said, I do know there's a couple of members that are Republican members that do have concerns, and you are certainly right. There's the probability of any Democrats coming on the budget is slim, but that has always been the case.
Yeah.
There's nothing new about that, and so it probably will require all the Republicans. But I think at the end of the day, they will all get there. And I always like to remind people, Republicans do not lose office by voting for tax cuts. That has never happened, and it's certainly not going to happen off of this package.
Good point there. Good point.
Victor, I had a quick question. So any tax increase in Arizona has to go to the voters. The legislature can't just do that. Does this thing have to go to the voters, or can the legislature do this by themselves?
As a tax decrease. Do tax decreases have to go to good question, to the voters?
Yeah. Actually, neither has to go to the voters. That is, the legislature can pass tax increases and they can pass tax decreases. But they can only pass increases off of a supermajority. So they have to get 2/3 of the members to pass the tax increase, which is very difficult, bordering on almost impossible.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why when they have done tax increases, and there have been a couple over the years, they usually do send them to the voters, not because they necessarily have to, but because then it's kind of a way of passing the buck from the legislature to the voters. But technically, the legislature could have passed tax increases, but they need a 2/3.
How, and folks are talking with Victor Riches with the Goldwater Institute, goldwaterinstitute.org. Check it out. Go to their site. They do a lot of work like this. Proposition 208. How are we getting around the Prop 208 is the so-called wealth tax. I think it was like 4.5%. And I know there's something in this proposed legislation to offset that, because in order to not do the Prop 208 4.5% on those making higher earnings, supposedly, they had to do something to offset that, because you would have to go back to the voters. What's going on there? Can you give us that 30,000 foot here?
Sure. Yeah. When the voters passed Prop 208, which as you know is of course being challenged right now. But if it was to stay in place, if the Supreme Court rules that it's constitutional and it stays in place, the Prop 208 monies would still exist. And the way they did it was they made a surcharge on top of the then existing highest rate. And so the surcharge would still be there. It would be off of the 2.5% instead of 4.5%. So that surcharge would still exist. There's also some general fund backfill involved with that to make up any difference. But the Prop 208 dollars would still exist under this proposal. It's just that no one in the state would be getting taxed at 8.5%. The highest tax bracket under this proposal would be 4.5%.
Okay, so in essence, it has to be backfilled through the general fund at, say, 4%. Somebody has to be made up for unless you're successful in eliminating 208 through litigation. It has to be backfilled. Well,
and keep in mind there would still be a 4.5% tax rate for higher income earners. So that difference between the 2.5% and 4.5% would be the Prop 208 dollars. So they would still exist. It just wouldn't exist off of a 4.5% maximum tax rate. It would exist off of a 2.5% maximum tax rate. So it's really, I've seen some stories where they're talking about how this would take money away from 208. That is not true. The 208 dollars would still exist. It's just saying that the wealthier individuals are not going to be paying that high income tax rate, although they still will be paying an income tax rate if 208 continues to exist that is about double what everyone else would pay.
Okay, Victor, appreciate the update. Do you think they'll be back by June 10th? And you seem confident that they'll get this tax cut voted in. I know you're not in the trenches there, but do you think you're confident this is going to happen?
I think it is a very good chance it will happen. I always hate to put any odds on things. Politics is a crazy game and the legislature is crazy, but I think there's a very good chance it will happen. You know, the clock is ticking. They do have to have a budget done by July 1st.
Yeah.
Now another scenario could be that they don't quite get it done. They do some sort of a continuing resolution and then continue to work on it. But I do think that at the end of the day, there's going to be very significant tax reform that I think is going to be very important to the state of Arizona.
All right, Victor, appreciate it. Folks, go to goldwaterinstitute.org and check out this op-ed. And Victor, give us any updates you got coming down the line. Love to hear from you again. Appreciate it. Hey,
thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Mark, got just a minute or two here, and then we'll continue on into the 5 o'clock hour. It is interesting. It's you've got some interesting scenarios here with this delay.